What happens when the person you're hunting is the ghost who built your empire? Tonight, a story of power, betrayal, and the invisible hands that hold our digital world together. A tale where trust shattered, identities erased, and two souls collided in the glow of 1,000 servers. The first time Sarah Crawford saw the anomaly, it was 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and she was alone in her corner office on the 42nd floor. Rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city of lights, a sprawling constellation of ambition and insomnia. Sarah stood before three curved monitors, her reflection fragmented across their surfaces. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled into a ruthless knot, eyes that had learned to see threats in every shadow. The anomaly was small, almost elegant. A system patch that appeared in their core infrastructure at 3:14 Sunday morning. Logged, executed, somehow invisible to every automated security protocol Orion Nexus had installed. The code was beautiful. That was the problem. Too beautiful. It optimized data routing with an efficiency her senior engineers couldn't explain, reduced server strain by 18%, and left no signature, no trail, no author, just perfection where there should have been none. Sarah's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She'd built Orion Nexus from smoking ruins, from ashes of betrayal so complete it had nearly destroyed her. 7 years ago, her business partner and lover, Jonathan Miller, had stolen her revolutionary server architecture, sold it to their largest competitor, and disappeared with enough money to retire at 35. The lawsuit had been brutal, the recovery even more so. She'd won eventually, rebuilt the company with steel resolve and an ironclad rule: trust the data, never the people. And now someone, some invisible ghost, was inside her fortress, leaving gifts. Gifts were just Trojan horses, wearing prettier ribbons. Sarah pulled up security footage for the weekend, her jaw tight. The breach window was narrow, 2:47 to 3:21 Sunday morning, 34 minutes when someone with physical access could have uploaded unauthorized code directly into the system. She scrolled through camera feeds. Server room C, floor 38. Empty hallways bathed in emergency lighting. Then movement. A figure in dark blue coveralls pushed a cleaning cart past camera 7. The timestamp read 2:51. The man moved without hurry, his face partially obscured by the cart's angle and the hallway's dim lighting. He stopped at the server room entrance, swiped a maintenance access card, and disappeared inside. Sarah's pulse quickened. She fast-forwarded. The janitor emerged at 3:19, right at the edge of the breach window. He continued down the hall, as if nothing had happened, pushing his cart with the same unhurried rhythm. She zoomed in on his employee Sabani badge. The image was grainy, but she could make out the name: M. Mitchell. Marcus Mitchell, Maintenance and Facilities, hired 4 months ago through an agency contract. Background check had flagged nothing unusual. Former military, honorable discharge, standard references. But standard didn't leave code like poetry in her servers. Sarah made a note in her private log, encrypted it 3 times, and shut down her workstation. Tomorrow, she'd dig deeper. Tonight, she just stared at the frozen image of the janitor's back as he wheeled his cart away from her most secure systems. In 7 years of hypervigilance, she'd learned that danger rarely announced itself with sirens. It arrived quietly, wearing work boots and carrying a mop. James Mitchell understood that most people didn't see him. It was a useful kind of invisibility. When you wore coveralls and pushed a cart full of cleaning supplies through corporate hallways at 3 in the morning, you became part of the architecture, expected, unremarkable, functionally invisible. Executives walked past him without meeting his eyes. Security guards nodded absently and returned to their phones. Even the cameras seemed to look through him rather than at him. He preferred it that way. Wednesday night, James clocked in at 11 as usual, nodded to Jerry at the security desk, and collected his cart from the facilities closet on the 36th floor. His route was consistent. Start at 42 and work downward, focusing on the technical floors where server rooms hummed behind reinforced doors, and climate control systems worked overtime to keep silicon cool. Most janitors hated the server floors. The constant white noise of cooling fans, the sterile air, the sense of being surrounded by machines that cost more than houses, it unnerved them. James's predecessor had requested a transfer after 2 weeks, claiming the rooms gave him headaches. But James found them peaceful. He moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, emptying trash bins, spot cleaning surfaces, checking that everything was in order. The work was simple enough that his mind could wander, and it often did. Back to another life, another version of himself that felt increasingly distant. Dr. James Anthony Mitchell, co-founder, chief systems architect, the man who designed Orion Nexus's revolutionary distributed server infrastructure from the ground up, who'd spent 3 years and countless sleepless nights building something he believed would change how companies handled data processing. That man was gone now, erased by lawyers and investors who decided vision was less valuable than quarterly returns. But the systems he'd built, those remained. James swiped his access card at Server Room C and stepped into the cool darkness. Emergency lights cast everything in shades of blue and silver. Row after row of server racks stretched before him like a cathedral made of metal and blinking LEDs. The sound was almost musical if you knew how to listen. The overlapping rhythms of thousands of cooling fans, the occasional soft beep of a diagnostic check, the whisper of processed air flowing through carefully designed ventilation. This room, these machines, he'd specified every component, had argued with suppliers about heat dissipation, had personally configured the redundancy systems that kept everything running even during power failures. The architecture bore his fingerprints in ways only he could see. James set down his cart and walked between the racks, his trained ear catching something off in row 7. A subtle irregularity in the fan noise. Not quite grinding, but not quite smooth either. He pulled a small toolkit from beneath his cleaning supplies and approached rack 7C. The access panel came away easily. Inside, bathed in LED glow, were the guts of Orion Nexus's secondary processing cluster. James's eyes tracked the cable runs, noting immediately where someone, probably during routine maintenance, had bundled power and data lines together too tightly. The resulting electromagnetic interference was minimal, but it was there. A tiny imperfection that would compound over months into system instability. He separated the cables carefully, rerouted the power line through a different channel, and secured everything with proper clips. The fan noise smoothed out immediately. James allowed himself a small smile. These weren't acts of sabotage, despite what paranoid security protocols might assume. They were acts of care. He couldn't simply walk away and let the systems he'd designed degrade through neglect or careless maintenance by technicians who didn't understand them deeply enough. Some people had children, some had art. James had server architectures that processed 80,000 transactions per second with 99.999% uptime. You didn't abandon your children. He closed the access panel and made notes in his personal log. Not the official facilities report, but a private record he kept encrypted on a device that never touched Orion Nexus's network. Small optimizations, minor adjustments, the kinds of things that wouldn't show up on automated monitoring but would keep the systems running beautifully for years to come. As he returned to his cart, James noticed one of the security cameras had shifted slightly, aimed more directly at the server racks than usual. Someone had adjusted it recently, probably within the last day or two. He felt a flicker of unease but pushed it aside. Paranoia had no place in his new life. He was just the janitor, invisible, unremarkable, safe. Sarah spent Thursday morning doing what she did best, excavating truth from data. Mitchell's employee file was thin, too thin. The references checked out when her head of security had called them, but they were the kind of references that said the right things without saying anything meaningful. Reliable worker, no complaints, completed tasks as assigned. The background check had revealed military service. 8 years in the Army, specializing in communications and network security. Honorable discharge, a gap of 18 months before he appeared working maintenance for a property management company in Seattle. Then another gap before he turned up at the staffing agency that had placed him at Orion Nexus. The gaps bothered her. People didn't just vanish for 18 months without leaving digital footprints. Not in the modern world, not unless they were actively trying to hide. Sarah pulled up his photo from the security footage, ran it through her private facial recognition database, one she'd built after the Miller betrayal, sourcing from professional conferences, tech publications, startup announcements, the kind of database that would make privacy advocates lose their minds, but had saved her company twice from corporate espionage. The search took 11 minutes. When the result appeared, Sarah's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Dr. James Anthony Mitchell, Ph.D. in computer science from MIT, co-founder and chief systems architect of Orion Nexus Technologies, left the company in 2018 under contested circumstances involving, she clicked deeper into the archived articles. The story emerged in fragments. James Mitchell and 3 other founders had started Orion Nexus as a server optimization startup. James had been the technical genius, the one who developed their core architecture. But when venture capital got involved, the investors wanted faster growth, more aggressive monetization. James had resisted, arguing that their infrastructure needed another year of development before scaling. The investors had pushed him out, used obscure clauses in the founding documents to dilute his shares, restructured his role until it became untenable, then offered him a buyout that was insulting compared to what he'd built. He'd refused it, fought back, but the legal battle had been expensive and lengthy. Eventually, James had simply disappeared from public record. No LinkedIn updates, no conference appearances, no new patents filed. The man who'd been publishing research papers and giving keynote speeches had gone completely silent. And now he was cleaning the servers he'd designed at 3 in the morning, leaving unsigned code improvements like love letters to a lost child. Sarah sat back in her chair, her mind racing through possibilities. Was this revenge? A long game? Was he planning backdoors, gathering data to sell to competitors? Or was it something else? Something her threat assessment training hadn't prepared her for. She picked up her phone and called Stephen Carter, her head of security. I need comprehensive surveillance on one of our maintenance contractors, James Mitchell. I want to know everywhere he goes in this building, everything he touches, everyone he speaks to, and I want to review footage of every shift he's worked for the past 4 months, all of it. Stephen's hesitation was barely perceptible. That's a lot of data, Sarah. We talking about a security threat? I'm talking about someone who knows our systems better than anyone else in this building, and I need to know why he's here. After she hung up, Sarah pulled up the server room footage again, watching James move through the racks with a familiarity that went beyond janitorial duties. He didn't check labels or reference diagrams. He moved like someone navigating their own living room in the dark. Instinctive, certain, intimate. The efficiency improvements, the elegant patches, they weren't attacks. They were a man taking care of something he still considered his, which somehow made it worse, because Sarah understood possession, understood the fierce territoriality of creation. And she understood that people who believed they'd been robbed would go to extraordinary lengths to reclaim what was theirs, even if that meant destroying everything in the process. Friday night, James sensed the change immediately. New cameras had appeared throughout the technical floors. Security guards were paying more attention, their gazes lingering just a fraction longer. And when he entered server room C, he noticed that several access panels had been resealed with new tamper-evident tape, the kind that showed if anyone had opened them. They were watching him specifically. James continued his work with deliberate normalcy, cleaning surfaces and emptying bins exactly as he would on any other night. But he kept his toolkit hidden, didn't approach any of the server racks, didn't do anything that might confirm whatever suspicions were building. At 2, he took his break in the facilities lounge on the 38th floor, a cramped room with a coffee maker, a microwave, and a table scarred with initials and coffee rings. He was supposed to be alone. The other overnight maintenance worker, Tommy, handled the office floors and usually broke at 1. The door opened. Sarah Crawford stepped in. James had seen her before, of course, passing through hallways, entering elevators, visible through glass conference room walls, but always at a distance, always separated by the invisible barriers of corporate hierarchy. Seeing her here in the cramped maintenance lounge at 2 in the morning, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual boardroom armor, was jarring. She was shorter than he'd expected, maybe 5'6", but she carried herself with the kind of presence that made height irrelevant. "Mr. Mitchell." Not a question. "Miss Crawford." James set down his coffee carefully. His heart rate had jumped, but years of military training kept his expression neutral. "Is there something wrong with the facility service?" "That depends." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat without asking permission. Her eyes were dark green, he noticed, and they were studying him with the focused intensity of someone conducting a very important evaluation. "How long are we going to pretend you're just the janitor?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications. James could have played dumb, could have asked what she meant, acted confused, retreated behind the safety of his assumed identity. But he was tired. Tired in a way that went deeper than missed sleep. Tired of pretending he didn't see the small failures in the systems he'd built, didn't feel the ache of watching his creation from the shadows. "How long have you known?" "Since Wednesday, though I suspect I should have figured it out earlier." Sarah's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in her eyes that might have been respect. "The code patches, they're yours, aren't they? The optimization improvements that started appearing 4 months ago." James nodded slowly. "Why? You could have submitted your findings through proper channels. Anonymous tip to the IT department. Would you have listened to an unsigned report from nowhere telling you that your systems have problems your own engineers can't see?" Sarah leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her. "Fair point." She was quiet for a moment, and James could almost see her mind working through calculations, threat assessments, strategic possibilities. "What do you want, James? Why come back after everything they did to you?" The question cut deeper than she probably intended. "I didn't come back. I never really left." James's voice was quiet but steady. You can fire someone from a company, strip their title, erase their name from the founding documents, but you can't make them stop caring about what they built. Most people would have just moved on, started something new. Most people didn't spend 3 years of their life designing every subnet, every failover protocol, every optimization pathway. James gestured vaguely toward the walls, toward the humming infrastructure that surrounded them. These servers, they're not just machines to me. They're the only thing I ever built that worked exactly the way I imagined it. Perfect, elegant, true. And when the investors pushed me out, they didn't just take my company, they took the only thing I was ever really good at. The silence that followed was different than before, less hostile, more considering. The military, that's where you learned to be invisible. Sarah's observation was sharp, accurate. Communication specialist, you learn pretty quickly that the most important work happens in the background, that being essential and being visible aren't the same thing. James allowed himself a tired smile. Turns out that skill set translates well to maintenance work. And the gaps in your employment history, the 18 months after your discharge? I was angry, spent a lot of time thinking about revenge, about building something that would make Orion Nexus irrelevant, that would prove I was the real genius behind the architecture. He shook his head. But I couldn't. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I didn't want to compete with what I'd already built. I wanted to come home, I guess. Sarah stood abruptly, and James tensed, unsure what was coming. I need to think about this, about what it means, about whether you're a threat or an asset or something else entirely. I'm not here to hurt your company. I'm here because abandoning those systems felt like abandoning. He stopped, the words too revealing. Abandoning what? Everything I ever was. Sarah studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. For what it's worth, the optimizations were brilliant. My senior engineers are still trying to figure out how you achieve that routing efficiency. Then she was gone, leaving James alone with his cooling coffee and the sudden unsettling awareness that his invisible safety had just shattered completely. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She returned to her office and pulled up everything she could find about the original Orion Nexus founding, about the investor conflicts, about the legal battles that had pushed James Mitchell out. The story was uglier than the sanitized version she'd inherited when she took over as CEO 3 years ago. The investors, led by a venture capital firm called Meridian Partners, had systematically marginalized James until his position became untenable. They'd questioned his technical decisions in board meetings, overridden his architectural recommendations, hired advisors who contradicted his expertise. When James had tried to stand his ground, they'd accused him of being difficult, of prioritizing perfection over profit, of holding the company back from its potential. The final buyout offer had valued his contributions at less than 2 years of a senior engineer's salary. For a man who'd built the foundation of everything Orion Nexus became. He'd refused it, fought in court for 8 months, and lost. The settlement agreement included a non-disparagement clause and a provision preventing him from working on similar technologies for 5 years. They'd legally exiled him from his own field of expertise. Sarah's phone buzzed. Stephen Carter had sent over the surveillance compilation, 4 months of footage showing James's movements through the building, edited down to moments of interest. She watched him work, not just cleaning, though he did that thoroughly, but also the small adjustments he made when he thought no one was watching, repositioning an access panel that wasn't quite aligned, testing a connection point, running diagnostic checks on systems that weren't part of his official duties. Every action was precise, almost reverent. In one clip from 6 weeks ago, James stood in front of Rack 12A for nearly 10 minutes, just looking at it. His expression was complicated, pride and pain mixed together in a way that made Sarah's chest tighten unexpectedly. She'd seen that expression before, in her own mirror in the months after Jonathan Miller's betrayal, when she'd walked through the ruins of their partnership and tried to salvage something worth saving. The recognition was uncomfortable. Around 4, Sarah found herself in the server room, the same one where James had been working earlier. The machines hummed around her, cool air flowing across her skin. She approached Rack 7C and opened the access panel James had worked on. Inside, everything was perfect. Cable management that would make engineers weep. Every connection secure. Every component positioned for optimal airflow. And there, barely visible on one of the mounting brackets, was something she almost missed. A tiny engraving, no bigger than a fingerprint. March 2016. James's initials and the date from when he'd originally installed this system, years before Sarah ever entered the building. She closed the panel carefully and stood there in the blue-lit silence, surrounded by the sound of machines that a broken man had come back to care for because no one else could love them the way he did. Sarah had spent 7 years building walls, trusting data instead of people, protecting herself from betrayal by never allowing anyone close enough to matter. It had kept her safe. It had also kept her alone. She pulled out her phone and sent an email to Stephen Carter. Discontinue surveillance on Mayor Mitchell. He's not a threat. Then she sent another email, this one to James's work account, knowing he probably wouldn't see it until his next shift. We need to talk, not as CEO and janitor, as two people who understand what it means to lose everything you built. My office tomorrow night, 11 p.m. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Saturday night, James almost didn't go. He stood outside the elevator on the ground floor at 10:58, his finger hovering over the button for the 42nd floor, trying to calculate the angles, the risks, the potential outcomes. Sarah Crawford had power. The power to have him fired, to blacklist him from every building in the city, to make his invisible life even more invisible. But she'd also called the meeting, had asked to talk not as CEO and janitor, but as equals. That had to mean something. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor at exactly 11. The hallway was dark except for the glow coming from Sarah's corner office. James walked toward it, his footsteps silent on corporate carpet, and knocked on the doorframe. "Come in." Sarah was at her desk, but she'd rearranged the space. Instead of sitting behind the massive executive desk in a position of power, she'd pulled 2 chairs to face each other near the windows. Between them was a small table with 2 cups of coffee. "Black, 1 sugar. I checked your preferences from the break room supplies order." James almost smiled. Of course she'd researched that. "Thank you." He sat down, and for a moment they just looked at each other. 2 people who'd both lost things they couldn't get back, who'd both learned to operate from shadows, who'd both built fortresses around pain. "I read the settlement documents. What they did to you, the non-compete, the non-disparagement clause, the valuation of your contributions. It was brutal. It was legal. That's what makes it worse. They didn't break any laws. They just optimized me out of existence. 5-year non-compete that expired 18 months ago. Yes. So you could work in this field again, could start a new company or join a competitor." "I don't want to compete with Orion Nexus." James interrupted gently. "I want to make sure it doesn't fail." Sarah leaned forward slightly. Why? After everything they took from you, why do you still care? James looked out the windows at the city lights stretching to the horizon. Because punishing the people who hurt you doesn't fix what's broken. It just breaks more things. He turned back to meet her eyes. I spent 18 months being angry. It didn't change anything. But this, making sure the systems work, that they serve the purpose I designed them for, that people's data and livelihoods are protected, that feels like something that matters. Even if you get no credit, even if you're invisible. I had credit before, titles, recognition, my name on patents and papers. It didn't save me when the investors wanted me gone. James's voice was steady, without bitterness. Maybe being invisible is safer. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then what if I told you I don't want you to be invisible? James's heart rate kicked up. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean that I've watched 4 months of footage of you caring for these systems better than anyone I've paid 6 figures to do the same job. I've reviewed your optimization patches, and they're more elegant than anything my current team has produced. And I've read enough about the original founding to know you got screwed by people who valued profit over vision. She set down her coffee cup with a decisive click. I want to offer you a position, official advisory role in systems architecture, reporting directly to me, full credit for your contributions, and a formal acknowledgement in our company documentation that you were one of the original architects of Orion Nexus's core infrastructure. James felt like the floor had shifted beneath him. You're offering me my life back. I'm offering you a job. Your life back, that's something only you can build. Why? You don't know me. For all you know, I could still be planning some elaborate revenge. I don't think you are. Sarah's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Based on what? Based on the fact that you engraved your initials on a mounting bracket in 2016, and this year you came back to make sure the cables were properly managed. That's not revenge. That's love. The word hung between them, too big and too true. James looked down at his hands, calloused now from maintenance work, but still steady, still capable of the precision work he'd trained for. If I say yes, people will ask questions about where I've been, why I'm here, what happened before. Let them ask. We'll answer honestly. You were one of the founders. You were forced out. You came back because you still cared, and I recognized value when I saw it. Your board might not like it. I rebuilt this company from ruins after my partner betrayed me. I learned to trust my own judgment over board politics. If they don't like it, they can leave. James studied her face, seeing the scars there. Not visible ones, but the kind that changed how you moved through the world. She'd been hurt, too, badly enough to understand what it cost to trust again. There's one condition. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating? I don't want a corner office or a fancy title. I want to keep working nights sometimes, in the server rooms, alone, just me and the machines. That's your condition? To keep doing maintenance work? That's when I do my best thinking. And honestly, it's when the systems are most honest with you. No traffic load, no user errors, just pure performance. You see things in the quiet that you miss during the day. Sarah smiled, a real smile, the first he'd seen from her. Deal. Though I'm also going to insist you attend senior engineering meetings and probably argue with people who think they know better than you. I can do that. And James, Sarah's voice turned serious, if you're going to work for me, I need honesty, complete honesty. No more invisible fixes without documentation. No more ghost code. If you see a problem, you tell me. Can I ask for the same from you? She looked surprised. What do you mean? I mean that I've read about you too, about Jonathan Miller and what he did, about how you rebuilt this place by yourself, trusting no one." James held her gaze. "If we're going to do this, really do this, you can't treat me like a potential threat forever. Eventually, you're going to have to decide whether you trust me or not." The silence stretched between them, taut with challenge and possibility. Finally, Sarah extended her hand. "Honesty. From both of us." "From both." James shook her hand. Her grip was firm and warm. "When do I start?" "Technically, you've been working here for 4 months, but officially, Monday morning, 9 a.m. And James, wear something other than coveralls." After he left, Sarah stayed in her office, looking out at the city lights and thinking about trust, about second chances, about what it meant to let someone past the walls she'd built so carefully. It terrified her, but terror, she was learning, was sometimes just the price of doing something that mattered. The news spread through Orion Nexus like electricity through copper wire. By Tuesday morning, every floor hummed with it. Dr. James Mitchell, the ghost who'd been erased from company history, had returned. Not quietly, not apologetically. Official advisory position. Sarah Crawford's explicit endorsement. The engineering wing buzzed with speculation and nervous energy. James arrived at 9 sharp, wearing dark slacks and a button-down instead of coveralls. The elevator ride to 39 felt longer than any midnight shift ever had. When the doors opened, faces turned, some curious, some skeptical, all watching. Michael Porter stood at the conference room entrance, arms crossed. The head of engineering had built his reputation on 3 years of steady optimization. Now the man who'd designed everything stood ready to judge that work. "Dr. Mitchell." Michael's handshake was firm, professional, guarded. "Welcome back." "Just James is fine. I'm here to help, not to take over." The senior team filed in, 8 engineers, varying ages, unified in their wariness. James took a seat at the side of the table, not the head. Small gesture, deliberate. Sarah joined via video from a client meeting in Chicago. Her face appeared on the wall screen, composed and authoritative. "Gentlemen, I trust you'll make Dr. Mitchell's transition smooth. He has insights into our infrastructure that no one else possesses. Use them." The first hour was cautious. James reviewed their recent optimization work, asked questions instead of issuing directives. When a junior engineer named Kevin hesitated over a load-balancing question, James sketched the answer on the whiteboard without condescension, explaining the theory like he was teaching, not correcting. By lunch, the temperature had shifted slightly. Not warm, but no longer frozen. The real test came Friday afternoon when the healthcare consortium contract landed. 18 hospitals across 3 states, seeking integrated data management. The timeline was aggressive. The technical requirements pushed their infrastructure toward breaking points. Sarah called the emergency meeting at 5. James stood at the presentation screen, pulled up the contract specifications, let the numbers speak first. 40% increase in processing load. Average usage patterns showed capacity. Peak surge analysis told a different story. "We have a problem." Michael leaned forward, defensive instinct kicking in. "Our load testing showed sufficient capacity. We ran scenarios for 30% growth. Load testing based on averages." James pulled up a second screen, hospital data flow patterns from his original research 7 years ago. Healthcare doesn't flow in averages. It comes in surges. Shift changes at 6 and 6. Emergency room spikes during evening hours. Insurance batch processing at midnight. The current hub and spoke model will choke on the variance. "So, what are you proposing?" Michael's tone carried challenge and genuine curiosity in equal measure. redesign the cluster distribution, move from hub and spoke to dynamic mesh network. Processing load distributes in real time based on actual demand instead of predetermined routes. The room went silent. Sarah's face on the screen remained neutral, waiting. Michael stood, walked to the whiteboard. That's fundamental architecture change. We're talking about reconfiguring every server cluster in the building. The downtime alone would violate half our service agreements. Zero downtime. James pulled up migration diagrams he'd sketched during sleepless hours the past 3 nights. We do it in phases. Migrate traffic gradually. 3 months instead of 3 weeks, but we never disrupt current clients. 3 months? Michael's skepticism sharpened. With all due respect, James, you've been back 5 weeks. The challenge hung in the air. Other engineers shifted in their seats. Sarah's voice cut through from Chicago, calm and absolute. Michael, do you have a better solution? No, but then I suggest we listen to the man who designed this system from the ground up. James, what do you need? He met Michael's eyes across the table. No triumph in his expression, just steady certainty. 5 engineers, full access to all system documentation, and trust that I'm not trying to rebuild my empire. I'm trying to save yours. Michael held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. Acknowledgement, if not quite acceptance. The migration became James's proving ground. He worked 18-hour days, but unlike the invisible repairs of his janitor months, now he had a team. Kevin from the initial meeting volunteered first, then 2 others. Eventually, Michael assigned his 2 best senior engineers, making it clear this was high stakes. They mapped migration strategies in conference rooms that smelled of coffee and dry erase markers. James ran simulations until his eyes burned, checking and rechecking calculations. The team started skeptical, but gradually fell into the rhythm of his thinking, the way he saw problems 3 steps ahead, the elegance of solutions that seemed obvious only after he explained them. Late one November night, 2 months into the migration, Sarah found him in server room C at 2 in the morning. He sat surrounded by tablets displaying real-time performance metrics, monitoring the transition of Cluster 12 to the new architecture. She set coffee beside his workstation without speaking at first, just stood there, watching the data scroll across screens. You're going to burn out. We're 70% through the migration. Performance gains are exceeding projections by 12%. Can't stop now. You can sleep for 6 hours and then not stop. Her voice carried firmness wrapped in concern. I've seen your schedule. You're averaging 4 hours a night. That's not sustainable. Neither was working as a janitor and pretending I didn't care about these systems, but I did that for 4 months. The admission hung between them. Sarah pulled a chair over, sat down beside him instead of standing above. Why are you pushing yourself this hard? The timeline has slack built in. We're ahead of schedule. James kept his eyes on the scrolling data for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. Because the last time I worked on something this important, they took it away from me. And I need to know if I can still do this, if I'm still worth something beyond invisible maintenance work. Something cracked behind Sarah's carefully maintained composure. She recognized that fear, the one that whispered you'd been fundamentally broken by betrayal, that you'd never be whole again. James, look at me. He did. You were always worth something. What they did to you didn't change your value. It just meant they were too blind to see it. Easy to say when you're the CEO offering me a second chance. I'm not offering you a second chance. I'm recognizing what was always there. There's a difference. The space between them felt charged with more than professional respect, with understanding that went deeper than architecture diagrams and migration schedules, with something neither of them had allowed themselves in 7 years. Sarah reached out, placed her hand over his on the desk, not quite holding hands, close enough to matter. The system architecture is brilliant, but that's not what makes you valuable. You know that, right? Then what does? The fact that you came back, that you cared enough to keep trying even when no one saw you, even when you had every reason to walk away. That kind of persistence, that dedication, that's what I need in this company. Not just the code, the person who writes it. James turned his hand over beneath hers, let their fingers interweave. Small gesture, seismic shift. Go home, she said softly. Sleep for at least 6 hours. Come back in the morning. We'll finish this together. Together. He tested the word, found he liked the sound of it. The system migration completed on a Thursday afternoon in late January. James stood in the operations center surrounded by his team, watching the final cluster transition to mesh architecture. Green status indicators cascaded across monitoring displays. Processing efficiency jumped 15% above even his most optimistic projections. Kevin let out a breath he'd apparently been holding for hours. Michael Porter, who'd spent the last 2 months working shoulder to shoulder with James, allowed himself a rare smile. I can't believe that actually worked. You doubted it. James kept his tone light, teasing. Every single day. But I was wrong. This is the most elegant system architecture I've ever seen implemented. Sarah had been watching from the back of the operations center, staying out of the way but unable to miss the moment. Now she stepped forward, her presence drawing everyone's attention. I think this calls for celebration. Conference room now. Someone order enough food to feed an army. The team erupted in relieved laughter and scattered conversations. James caught Sarah's eye across the room. She gave him a small nod. Acknowledgement. Respect. Something that felt almost like pride. 2 hours later, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and engineers swapping war stories about the migration's trickiest moments, James found himself standing by the conference room windows beside Sarah. The sun was setting over the city, painting glass towers in shades of amber and rose. Thank you, he said quietly enough that only she could hear. She glanced at him. For what? For taking a chance on the invisible janitor. For giving me a reason to stop hiding. You were never invisible, James. You just convinced yourself you were supposed to be. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Email notification. Sender name made his stomach tighten. Robert Nash. He'd worked with Robert during the original Orion Nexus days, one of the founding team who'd voted with the investors, who'd watched James get pushed out and done nothing. The message was brief, professional, poisonous in its implications. Heard you're back. Impressive work with the healthcare migration. Word travels fast in our circles. We should talk about old times and maybe some new opportunities. Coffee this week? James forwarded it to Sarah immediately with a simple note. This person worked closely with the investors who forced me out. No idea what he wants, but thought you should know he's making contact. Her response came within minutes. Thank you for telling me. Do you want to meet with him? James considered. Every instinct screamed no. But if Robert was reaching out now, after the migration success made news, it meant something. Not particularly, but if he's contacting me, might be worth knowing what he wants. Could be fishing for information. Could be worse. Agreed. Let me know when and where. I'll have Stephen run a background check. Of course you will. He added a smiley emoji that felt awkward but honest. Her reply made him smile. Baby steps, James. I'm working on it. The meeting happened Tuesday morning at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Orion Nexus. James arrived 15 minutes early, ordered black coffee, positioned himself where he could watch the door. Old military habits died hard. Robert walked in at exactly 10, looking every bit the successful tech executive. Tailored suit, expensive watch, the kind of confident stride that came from never questioning your place in the world. He spotted James immediately, approached with a broad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. James Mitchell? Man, it's been what, 7 years? Something like that. James didn't stand, didn't offer a handshake. Robert sat her down uninvited, his smile faltering slightly at the cool reception. Look, I know things ended badly back then. I want you to know I argued against how they handled your exit. I thought you deserved better. You voted with the investors. James kept his voice flat, factual. I saw the board minutes during discovery. Robert shifted, uncomfortable. I was outvoted on the specifics. I fought for a better severance package, a gradual transition, some recognition of your contributions. But the lawyers got involved. Things got complicated. Ancient history. James sipped his coffee, watched Robert over the rim. What do you want? I want to offer you an opportunity. Robert pulled out his phone, slid it across the table, showing a presentation deck. I'm launching a new startup. Server optimization, AI-driven infrastructure management. We've got $12 million in seed funding, and we're looking for a chief technical officer. Your reputation, your recent success, you'd be perfect. James didn't look at the phone, kept his eyes on Robert's face instead. I have a position. An advisory role isn't the same as being a founder again. Robert's tone shifted, became almost earnest. This would be your company, James. Real equity, real control, your name on everything, a chance to build something from scratch instead of trying to reclaim what was taken from you. The words landed like small explosions. Reclaim, taken. Robert knew exactly which wounds to press. I'm not trying to reclaim anything. I'm building something better. Better? Robert's skepticism showed clearly now. You're working for Sarah Crawford, who from what I hear is just as controlling as the investors who pushed you out. She's using your expertise without giving you real power. James felt cold anger kindle in his chest, not the explosive kind, the focused kind that came from someone fundamentally misunderstanding what mattered. You know what the difference is between Sarah and the investors. She acknowledges what I built. She gives me credit publicly. She listens when I say something is important. And when I told her I needed to work nights in the server rooms because that's when I think best, she didn't question it. She just said, okay. That's not the same as ownership. Ownership means nothing if you're building something you don't believe in. James interrupted, his voice still quiet, but absolute. I spent 18 months thinking about starting over, building something new to prove I was still valuable. But you know what I realized? I don't need to prove anything. I just need to do work that matters with people who respect what I bring. He stood, left cash for his coffee on the table. Good luck with your startup, Robert, but I'm not interested. Walking back to Orion Nexus, his phone buzzed. Sarah. How did it go? He called instead of texting. She answered immediately. He offered me a CTO position at his new startup. Equity, control, the whole founder package. Pause on the line. When Sarah spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. That's a significant opportunity. I turned him down. Why? Because I'm where I want to be, building what I want to build with people I actually trust. The silence that followed felt different, warmer, less guarded. "Okay, then I'm glad you're staying." "Me too." That night, James actually went home at a reasonable hour, slept 7 hours, woke feeling more rested than he had in months. Wednesday passed normally. Team meetings, code reviews, the comfortable rhythm of work that mattered. Thursday evening, he stayed late by choice, not compulsion, finishing documentation on the migration, making sure the next generation of engineers would understand the elegant complexity of what had been built. At 11, he was alone in his office when the building's emergency lighting flickered on. Odd. No scheduled maintenance. No weather that would trigger backup systems. His phone stayed silent. No alerts. That was worse somehow. James moved toward the operations center, instinct overriding protocol. The hallway lights were normal. Climate control hummed steadily. But something felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. He was halfway to the elevator when every screen in the building flashed red simultaneously. Emergency alerts erupted across his phone. Sarah's name at the top of the notification list. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. 16 years to the minute since he'd first designed these systems in a garage with 3 other founders and unlimited ambition. He ran. The operations center was chaos controlled by desperate focus. Every monitoring station showed critical alerts. System failures cascading across multiple clusters, unauthorized access attempts, data exfiltration warnings, emergency protocols engaging and failing in rapid succession. Sarah stood at the center of it all, directing her team with the focused intensity of someone fighting a war. When James burst through the door, the relief in her eyes was palpable. "Thank God. I need you to look at server cluster 7. Something's happening there that makes no sense." He moved to the monitoring station she indicated. The data flow patterns were wrong, not just compromised, fundamentally inverted. Someone had turned their architecture against them, using the elegant routing systems he'd designed to rapidly distribute malicious code throughout the entire network. The realization hit like ice water. This isn't a random attack. Someone mapped our architecture specifically. They know every optimization pathway, every redundancy protocol, every... He stopped. Ice flooded his veins. Sarah finished the thought quietly. "Every pathway you designed, I know." Their eyes met across the operations center, the terrible possibility hanging between them like smoke. "It's not me." "I know that too." Her voice was absolute. No hesitation. Stephen Carter appeared at Sarah's elbow, tablet in hand, face grim. "Trace the attack vectors back through multiple proxy servers and offshore routing. Final origin point is a private server registered to a shell company called Meridian Technical Solutions." James's stomach dropped. "Meridian? That's the venture capital firm that forced me out." "Same investors, different company structure." Stephen's expression was cold fury. "And guess who's listed as technical consultant? Robert Nash." The coffee shop meeting replayed in James's mind. The job offer, the probing questions about Orion Nexus's infrastructure. He'd thought Robert was fishing for information. He'd been mapping attack vectors. Sarah's voice cut through his thoughts. "How bad is it?" Stephen didn't sugarcoat. "Bad. They've accessed client data, copied proprietary algorithms, compromised encryption keys. If we don't contain this in the next hour, we're looking at catastrophic breach. Server Cluster 7 is the origin point." James forced his mind past rage into analysis. "They're using it as a distribution hub, pushing malicious code through our entire mesh network. If we can isolate it..." "We lose 30% of our processing capacity," Sarah finished. The calculation was instant. The choice was harder. James met her eyes. If we don't isolate it, we lose everything. She didn't hesitate. Do it. The next 40 minutes blurred into focused intensity. James coordinated with his engineering team, now arriving in response to emergency calls. Michael Porter showed up in sweatpants and a MIT hoodie, took one look at the monitoring screens, and started executing containment protocols without being asked. They isolated Cluster 7 at 12:34 a.m. The data hemorrhaging slowed immediately, but the damage was extensive. Sarah stood at the communication station, already on the phone with their legal team. Her voice steady, despite the exhaustion James could see in the set of her shoulders. Full disclosure, immediate notification. I want affected clients hearing this from us before they hear it anywhere else. Sarah, if we disclose now, the stock price will crater by morning. One of the senior executives who'd arrived mid-crisis tried to interject. We should wait until we have full scope. We disclose now. Her voice turned to steel. With honesty and transparency, that's how we maintain trust, even when everything else is burning down. James felt something shift in his chest. Admiration, recognition, the bone-deep respect that came from watching someone choose integrity over self-preservation in a moment of crisis. Dawn broke, gray and cold. The attack had been contained. The immediate bleeding stopped. But the wound was deep. Sarah called everyone into the main conference room at 6 a.m. 20 people, hollow-eyed and running on adrenaline and coffee. I want options for response. Legal, technical, public relations. Everything on the table. Stephen had more data by then. We have forensic evidence linking the attack to Meridian servers. Documented connection between Nash and Meridian. Clear motive. James's public rejection of their offer combined with our increasing market success. Can we prove it in court? Someone asked. We can bury them. Stephen's smile was sharp. If that's what you want. Sarah looked at James. The room noticed. Everyone understood suddenly that this decision wasn't just about corporate strategy. He thought about revenge. About 7 years of bitterness compressed into one moment of possible retribution. About how satisfying it would be to destroy the people who'd destroyed him. Then he thought about the last 4 months. About choosing to care for systems no one else noticed. About Sarah offering partnership instead of punishment. About building something that mattered more than settling scores. No. Every head turned. Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. No. If we go public with this, it becomes a legal battle that could drag on for years. Our clients will be caught in the middle. Our reputation will be defined by this attack instead of our response to it. So, what do you suggest? The question held no judgment, just genuine curiosity about his thinking. We make them irrelevant. We rebuild our systems stronger than before. We show our clients we can survive a sophisticated attack and come back better. We prove that our integrity and our architecture are both unbreakable. The silence was profound. Sarah studied him for a long moment, calculations running behind her eyes. Risk versus reward. Safety versus principle. The easy path versus the right one. That's a bigger risk than legal action. I know. You're asking me to trust that excellence matters more than revenge. I'm asking us both to choose who we want to be in this moment. People who destroy those who hurt us, or people who build something too strong to be destroyed. Sarah stood, walked to the windows overlooking the city, waking up to Friday morning, 30 seconds of silence while 20 people held their breath. When she turned back, her decision was written in the set of her jaw. Okay, we rebuild, but James, I need you to understand something. She lowered her voice so only he could hear. If this fails, if we lose clients or market share or the company because we chose integrity over retaliation, I'm still going to think we made the right choice, because I'd rather fail doing the right thing with you than succeed by compromising who we are. The weight of that admission settled between them. Trust, partnership, something that looked remarkably like faith. James held her gaze. Then let's make sure it doesn't fail. The next 72 hours were brutal. James coordinated system rebuilds with engineering teams working in shifts. Sarah personally called every affected client, explained what happened with complete transparency, outlined their response plan. Some clients understood. Others threatened to cancel. One major pharmaceutical company actually increased their business, citing Sarah's honesty as exactly the kind of leadership they wanted in a data partner. By Monday morning, the preliminary numbers came in. 3 major clients had canceled, just as the board feared. 5 new clients had signed on specifically because of how the crisis was handled. Tech publications started running features on Orion Nexus's response. Words like integrity and resilience appeared in headlines instead of breach and compromise. The board meeting that afternoon was contentious. Donald Preston, one of the oldest members, pushed hard for a vote of no confidence. It failed 7-3. Preston resigned quietly 2 days later, citing philosophical differences about company direction. James barely registered the political fallout. He was too focused on rebuilding, on implementing new security protocols that would make future attacks exponentially harder. Late Thursday night, 1 week after the attack, he was alone in Server Room C, running final diagnostics when the security alert pinged. Unauthorized access attempt, using his old maintenance card, the one that should have been deactivated months ago. Stephen's call came 60 seconds later. Someone just tried to use your old access card at the north entrance. Security footage shows a man in a delivery uniform dropping something in the lobby trash can 10 minutes ago. Facial recognition is running, but he knew where the cameras were. James felt ice replace the blood in his veins. Robert Nash. He's trying to frame me, make it look like I'm still accessing systems inappropriately. The investigation took 3 days. Traced the card theft to a junior facilities employee who'd been approached by someone claiming to be a security auditor. The description matched Nash. The employee had provided access to old card storage, thinking he was helping with a legitimate security review. Sarah sent a formal cease and desist to Nash and Meridian Partners, made it crystal clear that any further interference would result in immediate legal action. Nash's response came through his lawyer. Terse acknowledgement, agreement to maintain distance. "Do you think he'll actually stop?" James asked Sarah as they reviewed the legal correspondence in her office. "I think he'll try different tactics, but at least now we know to watch for them." She closed the document. "And honestly, every failed attempt he makes just reinforces that we're stronger than his sabotage." "That's a very optimistic interpretation." "I'm learning optimism from you," she smiled. "You taught me that choosing to build is more powerful than choosing to destroy. I'm applying that lesson." James's phone rang. His daughter's name on the screen made his heart jump. "Sorry, I should take this." "Of course." He stepped into the hallway. "Emily, everything okay?" "Everything's great, actually." Her voice carried warmth and excitement in equal measure. "I just booked my flight for next month. I'll be arriving Friday evening, leaving Sunday afternoon. Is that still good for you?" "Perfect. I'll take Friday off, and we can spend the whole weekend together." "Dad, you don't have to take time off for me." "I want to." The words came easier than he expected. You're more important than server optimization and client meetings. I finally figured that out. Pause on the line. When Emily spoke again, her voice was softer. You sound different. Happier, maybe? I am happier. Things are good here. Work is good. The company is stable. And I've been spending time with someone. My boss, actually. Sarah, the CEO. Oh my God, Dad. Are you dating your boss? It's not. We haven't exactly defined it as dating. We're just spending time together, getting to know each other, figuring things out. That's dating, Dad. That's literally the definition of dating. Emily's delight was audible. Tell me about her. What's she like? James glanced back toward Sarah's office, where he could see her silhouetted against city lights, phone pressed to her ear, handling business with focused intensity. She's brilliant, fierce and careful and brave in ways I don't think she even recognizes. She's been hurt badly, similar to how I was hurt, and she's learning to trust again. We're both learning, actually, how to be visible and vulnerable and all those terrifying things that come with letting someone matter. You really like her. I really do. Good. You deserve someone who sees how incredible you are, and she's lucky to have you. I'm pretty sure I'm the lucky one. Dad, you literally rebuilt an entire company's infrastructure while working as a janitor because you couldn't stand to see your creation fail. You're kind of amazing. Don't forget that. After they hung up, James stood in the hallway, letting Emily's words settle. He'd spent so long thinking of himself as the person who'd been erased, the failure who'd lost everything, that he'd forgotten he was also the person who kept showing up, who cared enough to maintain systems no one else understood, who chose excellence over bitterness. When he returned to Sarah's office, she was off the phone, looking at him with curiosity. Good call. Very good. Emily's coming to visit next month. She's excited to see me, which is really something. You've rebuilt that relationship well. We're trying. It helps that I'm actually present now instead of just physically existing. He paused. She knows about you, by the way. About us, whatever we are. Sarah's eyebrows rose. What did you tell her? That we're figuring things out, that you're brilliant and brave, and I really like you. He met her eyes. Was that okay? I can be more vague if you want to keep things private. No, it's fine. Good, actually. Sarah set down her pen. James, we should probably talk about what we are. Define this thing before it gets more complicated. His heart rate increased. Okay, what do you want it to be? I want it to be real, not just colleagues who sometimes have dinner together, but actually something more, something intentional. She paused, choosing words carefully. Like dating, with all the complications that involves given that I'm technically your boss and we work in the same company and there are probably HR policies we should review. Probably several. He couldn't quite suppress his smile. But, Sarah, I don't care about the complications. I care about you. If you want to try this, really try, not just carefully test the waters, then I'm in. Even knowing I'm going to be terrible at it sometimes, that I'll retreat behind walls when I get scared, or overthink everything, or struggle with trust even when I want to trust you. Even knowing all that, I'm not exactly a prize either. I'll probably disappear into server rooms when I'm stressed, or get overly focused on technical problems when I should be present with you, or struggle with feeling like I deserve good things. Sarah smiled, genuine and warm. We're quite a pair. We are, but I think we might also be good for each other. You push me to be visible. I remind you that trust is possible. We both understand what it's like to rebuild after destruction. Okay. Something resolved settled into Sarah's expression. Let's do this properly. Dating. Intentionally. With honesty about when it's hard and celebration when it's good. That sounds perfect. They sat there grinning at each other like teenagers. The city glittered outside the windows. The moment felt both monumental and quietly natural. We should probably tell HR, Sarah said eventually. Create proper documentation. Make sure there are no conflicts of interest. Follow protocol. Very romantic. I'm a CEO dating one of my senior advisors. Romance requires paperwork. James laughed, the sound echoing through her office. For the first time in 7 years, the future felt like something to build toward instead of something to survive. Sarah stood, walked around her desk, stopped in front of his chair. He looked up at her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For being patient while I learned to trust again. For showing me that being careful and being open aren't mutually exclusive." He reached for her hand. She took it. "Thank you for giving me a reason to be visible again, for seeing value in the janitor when you could have just had me fired and forgotten, for taking a risk on someone who had every reason to be bitter and broken." She squeezed his fingers. "You were never broken, James, just invisible for a while. There's a difference." Outside, the city moved through its Friday evening rhythm. Inside Orion Nexus, two people who'd been destroyed by betrayal were learning to build something that might actually last. The road ahead would have challenges. They both knew that. Clients to reassure, systems to strengthen, a relationship to navigate with honesty and intention, and all the messy complexity that came with really trying. But for the first time since the investors forced him out 7 years ago, James felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Hope. The consequences arrived slowly at first, then all at once. By the following Monday, 3 major clients had sent termination notices, exactly as the board had predicted. Sarah read each one aloud in the executive meeting, her voice steady, refusing to flinch. Then the surprises came. 5 new contracts landed by Wednesday. Companies specifically citing the transparent crisis response as why they wanted Orion Nexus handling their data. A pharmaceutical giant that had been evaluating providers for 6 months signed immediately, their chief technology officer writing a letter to the board praising Sarah's leadership. Tech Industry Weekly called, requesting an interview. Then Bloomberg. Then 2 podcasts specializing in corporate ethics. James watched Sarah field the attention with the same focused intensity she brought to everything. She never claimed sole credit, always mentioned the team, always brought him into the conversation when reporters asked about the technical response. By February, the attack had become a case study in crisis management instead of a cautionary tale about security failures. But the victory felt incomplete. Robert Nash had retreated, gone quiet. But James knew men like that didn't accept defeat. They waited, plotted, found new angles. The confirmation came on a Thursday morning when Stephen Carter appeared at James's office door, expression grim. "Security alert! Someone tried to use your old maintenance card at the north entrance 20 minutes ago." James's blood went cold. That card was deactivated in November. Should have been. Apparently, there was a gap in the system when you transitioned from contractor to employee. Your old card stayed active in the database. Stephen pulled up security footage on his tablet. Male, mid-30s, delivery uniform. Dropped the card in the lobby trash after the failed access attempt. Knew exactly where the cameras were positioned. Robert Nash. That's my guess. Facial recognition is running, but he was careful. The investigation took 3 days of tracing access logs and interviewing facilities staff. They found the source eventually, a junior employee named Marcus who'd been approached by someone claiming to conduct a security audit. The description matched Nash. The employee had provided access to the old card storage, thinking he was helping with official company business. Sarah's response was immediate and legal. Cease and desist letters to Nash personally and to Meridian Technical Solutions, language that made consequences crystal clear. Nash's lawyer sent back a terse acknowledgement, agreement to maintain distance, nothing admitting wrongdoing. James read the response in Sarah's office, felt the familiar anger simmer. He's not going to stop. He'll just find subtler ways. Probably. Sarah closed the file. But every failed attempt makes him look more desperate and us more resilient. Eventually, he becomes irrelevant through his own efforts. That's very zen of you. I learned it from someone who chose to care for systems in secret rather than destroy them in public. She smiled. You're teaching me patience. His phone rang. Emily's name lighting up the screen made his chest warm. Hey, sweetheart. Dad, I saw the news about the attempted security breach. You okay? The concern in her voice was startling. When had he last heard his daughter worry about him? When had he last given her reason to? I'm fine. We caught it early. Just someone trying to cause trouble. The article said they used your old employee credentials. That sounds personal. It is personal. Someone I used to work with. He's been making noise since I came back. James walked to the window, watched clouds gather over the city. But we're handling it. Legal team is involved. Security protocols updated. Nothing for you to worry about. Dad, when are you going to stop pretending I don't worry? Emily's voice softened. I've been worried about you for 3 years, ever since you disappeared into yourself after the lawsuit. I just didn't know how to reach you. The admission landed like a punch. James closed his eyes against the sting. I'm sorry for disappearing like that, for making you feel like you couldn't reach me. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because you sound different now, present, like you're actually living instead of just surviving, and I don't want you to slip back. I won't, I promise. He glanced back at Sarah, who was pretending to read email while clearly listening. Things are different now. Better. I'm building something real here. Speaking of which, when do I get to meet Sarah? James nearly choked. How did you... Dad, you mentioned her name 3 times in our last conversation. Your voice changed when you talked about her. I'm not oblivious. Emily's tone carried amusement and affection. So, when? Next month when you visit, if you want. She's offered to take us both to dinner. Definitely want. I need to meet the woman who got my hermit father to rejoin human society. After they hung up, Sarah was smiling. She sounds wonderful. She is. Smart and thoughtful and far too perceptive. James pocketed his phone. Also nervous about meeting you. I'm nervous about meeting her. Sarah's admission came quietly. What if she hates me? She's not going to hate you. She wants me to be happy, and you make me happy. That's all she needs to know. Just like that. Just like that. Emily's visit came the first weekend of March. James took Friday off. Actually, took it. Didn't just work from home, and picked her up at the airport. She looked older than he remembered from 3 years ago. More confident. The kind of self-possession that came from surviving your own losses. They hugged at baggage claim. Emily pulled back, studied his face. You look good, Dad. Like actually good, not just functional. I feel good. The truth of it surprised him even as he spoke. More than I have in years. Dinner that night was at a small Italian place Sarah had chosen, quiet, intimate, the kind of restaurant where locals gathered instead of tourists. James arrived early with Emily, but Sarah was already there, seated at a corner table, nervously straightening silverware. She stood when they approached. James watched two people he cared about size each other up in that first moment. Emily's assessing gaze, Sarah's carefully neutral expression. Then Emily smiled, genuine and warm, and extended her hand. "You must be Sarah. I've heard a lot about you." "All good things, I hope. Mostly about how brilliant and terrifying you are. In that order." Emily's grin widened. "I appreciate honesty." "I'm really not that terrifying." "She absolutely is," James interjected, kissing Sarah's cheek before sitting. "But in a good way. In a running a company with integrity way." Dinner started with the careful politeness of people trying to make good impressions, but gradually relaxed into genuine conversation. Emily asked Sarah about the cyber attack response. Sarah asked Emily about urban planning challenges. They discovered parallel thinking, systems that interconnect and affect each other in cascading ways. Over dessert, Emily leaned back, studied them both with her architect's eye for structure and form. "Can I ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly?" James tensed slightly. Sarah's expression became carefully attentive. "What's the plan? Long term? Because you're clearly committed to each other. You've built a life together. You're business partners now, which is basically the ultimate declaration of trust. So why not formalize the personal relationship too?" James nearly choked on his coffee. Sarah's carefully maintained composure flickered. "Marriage is complicated," Sarah started, falling back on corporate reasoning, "especially when you're running a company together. Legal implications, power dynamics, potential conflicts of interest." "Those are all excuses." Emily's tone stayed gentle but direct. "I'm not saying you have to get married. I'm asking if you've actually talked about what you want, or if you're both so busy being careful that you're avoiding the conversation." James and Sarah looked at each other. An entire dialogue passed in that glance. Acknowledgement that Emily was right. Recognition that they'd been skirting this question for weeks. Understanding that being careful had become its own form of hiding. "You make a good point." Sarah recovered first. "We haven't really discussed it." "So discuss it. Not tonight, obviously, but don't let fear masquerade as practicality." Emily's expression softened. "Look, I watched you both spend years being so defended that nothing could touch you. Now, you have something real and good, and you're both still operating like it might disappear. At some point, you have to choose to believe in what you've built." The words settled over the table like snow. Quiet, undeniable. They walked back to the hotel through Portland's evening streets after dinner. Emily had claimed tiredness and gone up to her room, leaving James and Sarah on the sidewalk outside. "Your daughter is remarkable." "She is. Gets it from her mother, the systems thinking, but the courage to speak truth directly, that's new." James looked up at the hotel windows. "She's right, you know, about us avoiding the conversation." "I know." Sarah turned to face him fully. "I've been avoiding it because wanting something that much feels dangerous, like I'm setting myself up to lose it." "I understand that fear. I've been living with versions of it for 7 years." James took her hand. "But I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions." "So what do you want? If fear wasn't a factor—" The question hung between them, sharp and necessary. "I want this to be permanent. Not just dating while we see how it goes, but actually building towards something that lasts. I want to marry you eventually when we're both ready. I want to stop being so careful about wanting things and just let myself want you completely. Sarah's breath caught. I want that too, all of it. But not yet. Not because I doubt you, but because I need to be completely certain I'm choosing this from strength rather than fear of being alone. That makes sense, and I'm not going anywhere. James squeezed her hand. We can take whatever time you need. Thank you for understanding. They stood on the sidewalk as the city moved around them. Two people learning that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was want something completely, knowing you might lose it. The months that followed developed their own rhythm. James and Sarah navigated their relationship with the same careful attention they brought to system architecture. Setting boundaries, communicating openly, being honest when things felt overwhelming. They had dinner together twice a week, sometimes talking about work, increasingly about other things. James learned Sarah had wanted to be a mathematician before business school, that she still did complex equations for relaxation, that her favorite music was jazz from the 50s. Sarah discovered James had nearly joined a monastery after his military service, that he could cook surprisingly well when he wasn't subsisting on takeout, that he had a dry sense of humor that only emerged when he felt completely safe. They worked together during the day with professional distance, then allowed themselves to be more open in private moments. It was a delicate balance, but they were both good at managing complex systems. Emily visited again in May, this time bringing her girlfriend, Rachel. They all had brunch together, and James watched his daughter interact with Sarah like they'd known each other for years, talking about Portland's housing crisis and server load distribution in the same breath. Afterward, walking Emily to her car, she pulled him aside. I like her, Dad. She's good for you, challenges you to be visible without pushing so hard you retreat. I like her too, more than I thought I could like anyone after everything that happened. Are you in love with her? The question should have surprised him. Instead, it felt inevitable. He thought about it seriously, examined his feelings the way he would analyze a complex problem, the way Sarah made him feel seen, the fierce way she protected people she cared about, the brilliant way she handled impossible situations, the vulnerable way she let him past her defenses. Yes, I think I am. Does she know? We haven't said it, but I think she feels the same. Then tell her, Dad, life's too short to keep the important things unspoken. That night, James almost called Sarah, almost drove to her apartment, almost let the words spill out. But something held him back, the fear that saying it would change things, that wanting too much would somehow break what they had. So he waited. Summer arrived hot and bright. The company continued growing steadily. 2 more healthcare systems signed on. A financial services firm requested a proposal. Orion Nexus's reputation for integrity had become their strongest marketing tool. In July, James received an invitation to speak at a major tech conference in San Francisco. Resilient architecture, building systems that survive attack. When he showed Sarah the invitation, she smiled. You should do it. You're good at this. Teaching, explaining, making complex things understandable. I don't know. Public speaking, all those people watching. You've been speaking at our internal engineering conferences for months. You teach our junior staff every week. This is just a bigger room. A much bigger room. Same principles. And, James, she caught his hand. You're allowed to be visible. You've earned it. He accepted the invitation. Spent August preparing the presentation. Sarah helped, pushing him to make technical concepts accessible without dumbing them down. Emily video called with advice about visual design. The conference came in early September. James stood backstage, heart hammering, watching the auditorium fill with 1,200 tech professionals. This was the opposite of invisible. This was declaring yourself expert and authority and worthy of attention. Sarah appeared at his elbow, handed him water. "You're going to be brilliant." "You don't know that." "I do, because you care about this, about teaching people to build things that last. That passion comes through when you talk. Just be yourself." The presentation went better than he dared hope. He walked through the architecture decisions that made Orion Nexus's systems resilient, explained how they'd survived the sophisticated attack, talked about choosing integrity over retaliation. During the Q&A, someone asked, "Knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently?" James thought about the question. About 4 months as an invisible janitor, about choosing to care even when no one saw, about Sarah taking a chance on him, about rebuilding trust, one honest moment at a time. No, every choice, even the painful ones, taught me something essential about what actually matters. You can't shortcut wisdom. You have to earn it through the work. The response got applause, not just polite conference applause, but the kind that meant something landed. Afterward, a dozen people wanted to talk, to ask follow-up questions, to share their own stories of rebuilding after catastrophic failures. James stood in the hallway outside the auditorium, genuinely engaged, no longer hiding behind professional distance. Sarah watched from the side, pride evident in her expression. On the flight back to Seattle that evening, she took his hand across the armrest. "I'm proud of you for being willing to be that visible, for sharing what you learned instead of hoarding it." "I'm learning visibility from the best." James squeezed her fingers. "You've been public about our crisis response when you could have hidden it. That takes courage. We make each other braver." The simple truth of it settled warm in James's chest. October brought the 1-year anniversary of James's official return to Orion Nexus. Sarah marked it by calling a senior staff meeting and publicly announcing his promotion to partner, full equity stake, co-leadership of the technical division, formal recognition in company documentation as one of the original architects. James sat stunned as she laid out the details. Real ownership, real authority, not advisory position, but actual power. "You don't have to do this." "I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because you've earned it." Sarah's voice carried absolute conviction. "You rebuilt our infrastructure. You saved us during the attack. You've mentored the next generation of engineers. That deserves partnership, not just a title." Michael Porter was the first to stand, started the applause. The rest of the team followed. Genuine celebration, not perfunctory recognition. After the meeting, alone in Sarah's office, James struggled to articulate what he felt. "I spent 7 years thinking I'd never get back what was taken, and now you have something better." Sarah came around the desk, stood in front of him. "Not just recovered, built new, on your own terms with people who value you, including you, especially me." He pulled her close, held her like she might vanish if he let go. Sarah's arms came around him, steady and certain. "I love you." The words slipped out before he could second-guess them. "I know we haven't said it, but I do. Completely." Sarah pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Hers were bright with unshed tears. "I love you too. I have for months. I was just too scared to say it. We're both pretty good at being scared. And pretty good at choosing courage anyway." She kissed him, soft first, then deeper, promise and presence in equal measure. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sarah's expression had shifted to something resolved. "I'm ready." "Ready for what?" "To marry you. To stop being careful about wanting permanent things, to choose you completely without reservation." James felt his heart trip over itself. "You're sure?" "Completely sure. I don't need more time to know this is real. I don't need more proof that you're not going to disappear. I'm done protecting myself from being happy." "Then yes." James cupped her face in his hands. "Yes to marriage. Yes to permanent commitment. Yes to building something that lasts." They stood in her office as the city turned its lights on against the autumn evening. Two people who'd been erased by betrayal, finally allowing themselves to believe in something unbreakable. The wedding planning was characteristically them. Small ceremony, close friends, and key team members. No elaborate production, just honest celebration. They chose the operations center as the venue, the place where they'd weathered their first crisis together, where green status lights had cascaded like blessing after James completed the system migration. Emily flew in 3 days early, claimed the role of maid of honor without asking. Michael Porter agreed to be best man with visible emotion. "Never thought I'd see the day you trusted anyone this much," he told James over drinks the night before. "Neither did I. Turns out trust is just choosing to believe in people, even though it's terrifying." The ceremony happened on a Saturday evening in late November. Cherry blossoms had been flown in from California, their petals drifting across the polished floor. 60 people gathered in a room usually dedicated to monitoring data flow and system health. James stood at the front, Michael beside him, watching Sarah enter. She wore a simple dress, deep blue instead of white. No veil, no pretense, just herself, beautiful and certain. When she reached him, he took her hands. They'd written their own vows, promised things that mattered instead of traditional pledges. James spoke first, voice steady despite emotion threatening to crack it. "I promise to be visible with you, to trust you with the things I build, the fears I carry, the person I'm becoming, to choose presence over protection, always." Sarah's turn. Her voice was stronger than he'd ever heard it. "I promise to trust you, to share power instead of hoarding it, to believe in partnership over control, to have faith that being seen by you is safe." The rings were simple bands, engraved inside with binary code that translated to "together" in 6 languages. A private joke that made them both smile. When the officiant pronounced them married, the room erupted in genuine celebration. James kissed Sarah like they were alone, like nothing else existed except this moment of choosing each other completely. Emily's toast at the reception was brief and devastating. She stood with champagne glass raised, looked at her father with love and pride. "My dad taught me that good architecture survives because it's designed to adapt. That resilience comes from building systems that can flex under pressure instead of breaking." Her gaze shifted to include Sarah. "You've both built something extraordinary, not just a company, but a relationship that survived attacks and your own fears. That's the kind of deliberate, resilient, honest love I want to build in my own life." Everyone drank. James felt tears in his eyes and didn't bother hiding them. Later, on the balcony outside the operations center, James and Sarah stood alone. The city spread below them, lights stretching to the horizon. The same view Sarah had looked at alone for so many years, now shared with someone who understood her completely. "We did it." Sarah's voice was soft. "Built something that lasts. We did. Together." Below them, the building hummed with life and purpose. Inside, the server systems James had designed ran perfectly, processing data for clients who trusted them, supporting operations that valued integrity as much as efficiency. They'd survived betrayal and exile, rebuilt trust from ruins, chosen courage over safety again and again until it became second nature. In a building of steel and circuits, two invisible hearts had found something stronger than control, more powerful than revenge, more lasting than fear. They'd found each other, and in finding each other, they'd found themselves. The systems they'd built, technical and personal, ran beautifully now. The walls they'd once hidden behind had been demolished, rebuilt as bridges. The scars from old wounds had healed into wisdom about resilience and choice. James thought about the path that brought them here, from invisible janitor to acknowledged partner, from broken exile to someone building a permanent life. Every painful step had been necessary. Every moment of fear had taught him something essential about courage. He'd learned that being seen was worth the risk of being hurt, that trust could be rebuilt from nothing but honest effort, that excellence mattered more than revenge, that the opposite of betrayal wasn't safety, it was choosing to believe in people anyway. Sarah had learned parallel lessons. That control couldn't protect you from pain, that vulnerability was strength rather than weakness, that some walls needed demolition rather than reinforcement, that the most powerful thing you could build wasn't a fortress against pain, but a life honest enough to survive it. Together, they'd learned that the most important architecture wasn't made of servers and code. It was made of daily choices to show up, to trust, to build towards something instead of away from everything. The November air was cold, but not bitter. They stood on the balcony, Sarah leaning back against James's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. Married now, partners in every sense, committed to whatever came next. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd just had you fired that first night? Sarah's question was hypothetical, curious rather than regretful. I'd probably still be working somewhere as a janitor, maybe forever, convinced that being invisible was safer than risking visibility again. And I'd still be here alone, building walls higher instead of doors wider, trusting data but never people. We saved each other. We did, though it took us long enough to admit it. James laughed. The sound carried across the balcony, warm and genuine. A year ago, he couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that. Now it came easily. Inside, the celebration continued, their chosen family dancing and talking and celebrating two people who'd chosen courage when fear seemed smarter, who'd built something beautiful from the rubble of their separate destructions. The future stretched ahead, uncertain in details, but solid in foundation. There would be challenges, new crises, difficult decisions, growth that required discomfort. But they would face it together, visible, vulnerable, unafraid. In the quiet between heartbeats, James realized he was happy. Not just content or satisfied or functioning, actually happy. The kind of happiness that came from being fully yourself with someone who saw all of you and chose to stay anyway. Sarah turned in his arms, looked up at him with eyes that reflected city lights and private joy. Ready to go back in? In a minute. I just want to stay here with you a little longer. We have all the time in the world now. Yeah, we do. They stood together as the evening deepened. Two people who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could build wasn't a system or a company or a fortune. Sometimes the bravest thing you could build was simply a life with someone else. Honestly, openly, without walls. And that architecture, the kind made of trust and choice and daily courage, was the most resilient of all.